Hi, my name is Frank. Welcome back to Channel 33 RPM, your channel for vinyl gear and more. So like a couple months ago, I did this video about 5 things they didn't tell you about record collecting. And I asked viewers to weigh in with more stuff they didn't tell you about record collecting. And some people are like, who is they? I don't know. This is just stuff about record collecting that isn't necessarily common knowledge, at least when you're starting out, or even once you're kind of gone down that road. This is stuff that people don't necessarily talk about. This is stuff a lot of people have to discover on their own. So it's really worthwhile. Check this out. All right, this first one, I love this one. It says, when someone finds a record in a thrift store and knows it has a value of $70, they tend to put $70 into that bank in their mind. But records are often hard to sell. You might have $70 in the real bank someday because of finding that LP, but it could take almost forever. Records are harder to sell at collectible prices than people think. This is so true. Records aren't necessarily worth what you think they are, or at least in the real world. And so many of us just go to Discogs and see what these records are selling for and think that we have like tens of thousands of dollars in our collections. And yes, in theory we do, but in practice, I mean, try to go through that whole process of selling those records for that price. And I mean, it's doable. You can throw them up on Discogs and mail them out and go through all that process. But most of us are not willing to go through all that to get the maximum value. And if you sell them locally on the online classifieds or you trade them in at the store, you're probably not going to get what the Discogs average selling price is. Okay, Roland Ramirez wrote, no one ever mentions the fact that record collecting can be addictive. Also, once you have become serious about collecting vinyl, it can take up a lot of real estate. I think a lot of record collectors probably have a little bit of compulsive tendency about them, myself included, right? I don't just want one Judas Priest record. I want to amass the whole collection. And you kind of get used to having a steady supply of new records and new music coming in. So in that respect, it can be addictive. And it does take up a lot of real estate. You only have to watch some vinyl community YouTube videos to see people have rooms dedicated to their collections, myself included. And it does take up a lot of space. But I kind of like having a music library and a music room. And I know a lot of you do as well. But just be aware once you get into this and you get that bug, maybe that buying bug, maybe that's a better way. Maybe that's a better term rather than saying addictive. Once you get that buying bug and you keep accumulating that stuff, you are going to need room for it. All right, this one, Intelligence Limited. This one's quite the comment. This viewer wrote, another one with record collecting is probably just a distraction from your inevitable death. Ultimately, once you've acquired an album you've dreamed about owning, within a month or less, you've forgotten you even own it and you've moved on to other wants. Happens to me all the time. It's a fairly empty experience spiritually, or you're doing it to fill a spiritual emptiness. You wonder, once acquired, what all the fuss was about. You may just as well be collecting bottle tops, but there's always another record to chase. I mean, I kind of laughed at the beginning of this, but I did not intend to dismiss this comment. I think there is something valid about this. I mean, just speaking to my own experience, for the longest time, I had a list of grails. I don't like that term, but a list of albums I really wanted to acquire, and they were hard to find. And I quite clearly remember after, a year or two of searching for this record and hoping to get the right condition at the right price, finally acquiring it and loving it and being so excited and listening to it once or twice. And then, okay, it's kind of over. It's on my shelf. And I'm on to the next thing. I may go back and revisit it once in a while, but I'll never have that initial rush of getting that record. So despite the negative tone to this comment, it is valid. I mean, there is some accuracy to this, and that is something that few people talk about. Today's video is brought to you by the Channel 33 RPM store. Drop by and check out new designs like this and like this. I also have plenty of old school designs like the classic Channel 33 RPM logo. I know you're gonna dig it, and proceeds from all sales help support this channel and help Channel 33 RPM continue to grow. This comment comes from Kane, and Kane writes, one thing they don't tell you about record collecting is that they can be snarky, self-important jackass know-it-alls when it comes to taste in both record choices and gears. I learned a long time ago that there's no point in arguing aesthetics. People typically like what they like. Lots of folks love Sansui, Marantz, Pioneer. I gravitate more towards Onkyo, Techniques, and Realistic. It's what I like. Some folks even dig the sound from across the. I don't, but if you do, fine. This is actually a really good comment, because there are a number of snarky, self-important jackass know-it-alls in the community, right? I tend to call them gatekeepers, but these are the people who tell you what gear you need. These are the people who tell you what records are cool. These are people who tell you you can only own certain music on vinyl rather than CD. These are people who say that your record player sucks. And that does happen in the vinyl community. It happens in any collecting community, and you really have to ignore that. And as the viewer says in this email, go with what you like, man. Find what you like. Find the gear you like. Find the music you like and stick with it, and ignore the jackasses. All right, Music 20 wrote, it's also a potential gateway drug. One day you're collecting records, then you've expanded into cassettes and even 78s, and then finally you're collecting credit card bills, which you have to hide from the wife. Yeah, and this speaks to the whole point of record collecting nowadays not being a cheap hobby, maybe like it was a decade or two ago. It's expensive, and you want to buy more records, and I've experienced this as well, where, all right, well, I'm digging records, let me re-explore some of the tapes I had as a kid, say start buying cassettes. Personally, I have not gone into the 78 thing, but yeah, man, it's an abyss, and you kind of keep going into that collecting hole, and it does cost a lot of money, and then Amazon or the postman or whoever shows up with more records, and your wife is kind of looking at you like, what the hell is going on? So it does have the potential to spiral, most definitely. Albert Smith wrote, my issue is I have a lot of records that don't get played hardly at all, yet I want them in my collection. It's weird liking or loving an album, so you buy it for your collection, then you realize you haven't played it for God knows how long, yet you still want it for that time you decide to play it. Again, this is something they don't tell you, but it is so true. I have, I don't know, like 1,400 records here. And some of them, including some of the grails we spoke about earlier in this video, I was so excited to get that I have them in my collection. I enjoy having them, and I like knowing that they are there to listen to or when I want to, but some of them don't get a lot of spins. I mean, personally, I try to do a purge of my record collection every couple of years and kind of trim out some of the fat. Not that the fat is necessarily a bad record, but something maybe I know I won't listen to again, and maybe someone else will get some more enjoyment out of owning that record. And I'll take that money and reinvest it in my collection. But I have a whole bunch of records I love, and in my lifetime I may only listen to a few more times, but I like knowing the fact I have them in my collection. Is that weird? Is that compulsive? Maybe, but that's something they definitely don't tell you about record collecting. St. Martin's wrote, 4 more they don't tell you. I'll go through these one at a time. If you have to move, oy vey, so true. I mean, earlier in this video we talked about records taking up a lot of room, and they do. And once you start amassing a bit of a collection, they are heavy and hard to transport. Any of you who've moved with your collections can attest to this. 6 years ago, my family and I, my wife and my kids, we moved from Edmonton, Alberta, back to our home here in Winnipeg after living out west for 12 years. And I had to rent a U-Haul trailer just to move my records and all my music gear and the U-Haul boxes. I'll leave a link to this video below. It was fun to make that video, but I think I put 50 records per U-Haul box, maybe something like that. And I had a trailer full of these records. So yeah, they're definitely hard to move, and that's something a lot of people don't consider before getting into this. What else did St. Martin's write? If you try to sell your valuable vinyl, stores will always lowball you. Again, this kind of speaks to that point earlier in this video where our collections may not be worth as much as we think they are. At least if we want to go and resell them the cheap way, right? You can go through the whole process of selling on Discogs, but it can be a pain. But if you sell it to your local stores, you're definitely not going to get what you think they're worth. Number 3, you say one day you're going to sell some or all of your records for retirement. You won't. And this is what I tell myself too, like, I'll sell them for retirement maybe, but what a pain. Think about that for a second. If you have a collection of any size, a sizable collection, a couple hundred records or more, like how much of a pain would it be to sell those records? Do you really want to list them all individually on Discogs and mail them out? Maybe, maybe not. Do you want to sell them all locally and have you know, dozens of people come over and pick through your collections. The whole thing is going to be, it's going to be a pain. I'm kind of okay with trimming the fat off, as I said, regularly, but selling the whole collection, man, that would suck. I don't know what is going to happen to my collection as I grow older. I don't know what will happen to when I die, but there's going to be a lot of work there for me or for someone else. And for your wife, kids, and nephew don't want your stuff when you're gone. They don't care. Again, this speaks to what we just spoke about. What's going to happen to your collection when you're no longer here? I don't want to burden my wife and kids or whoever with a collection they don't care about. And I don't think I know they won't care about to the same extent that I do. Maybe they'll want to hold on to some of the records that meant the most to me, but eventually someone's going to want to sell them off. So it's going to be quite the job. Dynamo wrote, best thing to do as a record collector is only buy albums that you absolutely love. Yes, yes, yes. Don't listen to the gatekeepers. Don't buy the records you think you need to own, because everyone owns those records. Buy the artists and buy the albums that you love, and leave it at that. Crazy Praying Mantis wrote, what they don't tell you is that you don't have to own the essentials. Just buy what you like. Don't feel inferior because you don't have a copy of Rumors or Dark Side of the Moon or some Dylan album that you don't even like because everyone says you must have it on vinyl. You do you. This is probably some of the best advice I've read so far in this video, and something that is not talked about often enough, and something that they don't tell you. If you watch enough YouTube videos, what they will tell you is that you have to own these records. These are essentials. These are cornerstones of any collection. And really, they're not. Again, it just goes back to the point. Buy the albums you love. Buy the artists that you love. And don't feel pressure to own Dark Side of the Moon. I do own Dark Side of the Moon, but it's not even my favorite Pink Floyd album. And I know someone's giving me a thumb down right now, even just for saying this. But as a Crazy Praying Mantis said, you do you. That's all that matters. All right, this comment says, record collecting is a rabbit hole. So first, don't let FOMO, fear of missing out, rule your decisions ever. Second, curate a list and stick as close to that as possible. We'll never listen to everything you grab otherwise. This is so true. And as much as I dig Record Store Day, it's built on that whole fear of missing out, right? This whole limited edition releases and all that. If you don't get it now, you're never going to get it. And you just have to forget about the FOMO stuff, because it is real. It is real. I've succumbed to it. I think we all have. But really think about something. Despite being a limited edition record, is that something you really want in your collection? Is that something you're going to listen to a lot? Are you going to get the return on your money? You know, if you spend $30 on it, you can get $30 of enjoyment out of listening to that record. Or are you buying it to resell? Because as we've talked about, it's not always easy to resell records. And Zachary wrote, you don't need to keep buying vinyl constantly. It's okay not to build your collection fast. Again, super good advice. And I think this is what maybe one of the harmful aspects of YouTube vinyl community videos are. You watch videos like this one where you see a wall of records behind you and you're like, oh man, I want that. I want to build up a whole collection. But you have to remember, this stuff happened over years. I've been building my collection for 30 years. So if you're just getting into it, don't feel you need a stack, a wall of records behind you, or a wall of CDs or whatever. Buy records as you can afford them. Because think about it, if you buy a dozen records one weekend, you're not going to sit down and really appreciate them, right? Buy one at a time, buy two at a time, buy whatever you can afford, and really sit down and get into those records and appreciate them. And that's really good advice. It is okay not to build your collection fast. All right, 33ers, what else don't they tell you about record collecting? Let me know in the comments. If you missed the first video in the series, I will also link to that. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of the week. Until next time, keep on spinning.